Joel, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Welcome to East Tennessee. So we're here at the Healthy Tennessee Summit, just trying to find ways we can come together as a community and drive health across our state. And Joel obviously is a longtime multi-generational farmer up in Virginia area, Stanton, Virginia. Tell us a little bit just about yourself, Joel. What drives you and what's life like on the farm?
Yeah, well, so, we've been farming. My family came, my parents bought the original little core property in 1961. So I grew up there. I was 4 when we came to the farm, and it was a, gullied rock pile. And my grandfather was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it first came out in 1945, and always had compost piles and non-chemical and all that. So Dad got it from him, and Dad was an accountant, and he came to the non-chemical approach primarily as an economist. He saw the chemical approach as like a drug trip. You got to buy more of it. You got to get it's like an addiction.
Yeah, the oscillate.
And so we got there and started experimenting with how do we do this? How do we build soil? How do we reduce the thistles? And so basically we had 20 years of kind of glorified homesteading experiments under our belt. He was an accountant, worked in town. Mom was a school teacher, worked where she was at the high school, and the off-farm jobs paid the mortgage. The story. But by the time I was in early high school, the farm was paid off, so it was there. But it was not a going concern. We basically grew all our own food. We grew some couple pigs then we had a couple milk cows that we milked, and we made our own butter and cheese and had our own milk. We had our big garden. We basically ate and lived off the land, but it wasn't really a going concern. And so I got my first chickens when I was 10, and had chickens all through through high school. I served a couple of restaurants, a couple of schools, back when schools still cooked from scratch.
Yeah.
And had my customers, and I'd pedal them around with my bicycle, and people at church, and had my routes. And so when I went to college, shut all that down, and went to college, come back, and I'm okay. Now how do I get how do I get here? Well, this is Watergate then, and I majored in English and had worked at the newspaper for my junior and senior years in high school, and had a flair for writing. I knew. I mean, I was in all the plays, drama, essay contests, speech contests, all that stuff through through school and college, debate, and so I thought, well, maybe I could go find my deep throat, bring down another president, and then I can write my bestseller and retire to the farm. That was kind of my first plan. But the newspaper, I'd worked there during high school, and they liked me, and they said, well, when you get out of college, come on back and we're good to go. And so that allowed me to come straight home from college, live at home, work at the newspaper, and do the part-time farm thing. And Teresa and I got married then and lived in the attic. We fixed up the attic of the farmhouse, lived up there, and drove a $50 car, grew all of our own food. We lived on like $300 a month. And
The good old days.
yeah, it was the good old days. We didn't have a TV, still don't have a TV. And how do I get back to the farm? This is a recurring thing. But by living so cheaply, we were able to save half our paychecks. So within 2.5 years, we saved enough that we could live for a year. So September 24, 1982, I walked out of the newspaper office with enough that we could live on for 1 year. And I didn't think we'd make it. But I thought, I'll be there full time, and maybe the full time away by being there and getting a lot of things done, we can chop our total time away from 15 years to 12 or 12 to 8 or whatever. And as it turned out, it lasted, and we made it. And it took about 3 years before we, as I say, we could exhale. we're going to make it. That took about 3 years, but today we have 22 full-time salaries generated from the farm, and we're in the beef, pork, chicken, turkey, lamb, duck, rabbit, and we direct market everything, and have a full-blown apprentice and stewardship program. Do a lot of events and gatherings, a lot of farm tours. There's a heavy educational component, and I've written 16 books, and I'm the editor of the Stockman Grass Farmer, which is the number one, the world number one trade organization magazine devoted to pastured livestock. And so it's been quite a run.
Oh yeah, you would never plan it like that, but I love how it
No.
just ends. Like it just how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I hope it hasn't ended yet.
Oh, exactly right. No. And
You know something I don't know?
No, but I do know iridologist. No. And so, at what point did you gravitate towards just the value and the importance of health for your whole community, right? And that's kind of embedded in a farm.
Yeah. Well. I mean, I grew up. Dad. I remember as a child having Adele Davis. I don't know if you've ever. Adele Davis was the early maven. She was one of the early mavens of health. Eat right to keep fit. Let's cook it right. Those were her two, big books. And so, I grew up with this, no chemical, food health thing. And it was interesting because, all of our I don't know what should our religious or Christian friends disparaged this, a bunch of, greeny weeny environmental, earth muffin, tree hugger types, and kind of, joked with us. And so that was our church friends, but then our farm friends were hippies. This is late 60s, early 70s, and you could smell the marijuana, but they were into what we were into. So I grew up with this really cool eclectic thing of these very conservatives and these very loose, yeah. And I just thought that was, I didn't think anything of it until later. I realized how polarized these groups were, but that has given me, I think, a wonderful bridge building voice in the movement to be able to straddle those worlds, and it's been good. So we grew up, tiger's milk and obviously our own food and making that message from day one. We always said Dad was organic before Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. That was the way we grew up.
It's just normal for you. It was just like a calling.
Yeah, it was very normal. I mean, in the first health food store came to town, we were right there. We were getting stuff from the health food store, and we would glean a lot. If somebody had a yard apple tree or something, and we found out, we'd go and pick apples. And, Dad and I would joke that, like somebody at church, our apple tree, we have a really good year, come and get some apples. Well, people would go over and they'd get a little grocery bag full, of apples. Okay, that's fine. We'd go over with 2 55-gallon barrels, and ladders. And I remember Dad joking with me one time. He said, people come to kick these tires. We come to get food, man. We were coming to get food. And so, of course, we food mill, we made our own applesauce. We still do, Teresa. We have fruit trees and so, we'll take several bushels and we'll can 80 quarts of applesauce and roast in the basement. And so, I mean, Teresa, when she sends me shopping, I need, 2 quarts of green beans, 2 quarts of tomato juice, 3 quarts of applesauce and squash and, sauerkraut. And I go to the basement and bring up the food. I mean, that's just the way we eat.
And I think that's how our society can be. But we got to start teaching them and welcoming them into a new way of thinking, a new way of being. Right. What would you suggest if I said, Joel, what's maybe your top 2 to 3 things that would radically change the health of our state or country for that matter by incorporating, utilizing farms and healthy farms, supporting farmers. What 2 or 3 things come to your mind that maybe we're not doing well as a society?
Yeah, I've kind of have a three-part recipe for that, and it puts the onus on the consumer, and I do that because people are always blaming, well, if the farmers would just do this. Why do the farmers have to use these chemicals? Why are they blah, 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 the factory farms and Tyson, all this stuff, and the truth is that farmers have always produced to the market. They always have. They always have. And if the market asks for something else, farmers will produce something else.
Yes.
And so I don't let consumers get by with finger pointing at the farmers. I say, look, if you want a different food system, you got to make it, because there are actually twice as many people incarcerated in American prisons as there are farmers. So they're not the drivers anymore. They're the responders of what the greater culture is asking for. So how do we change that? So to people, I say, number one, get in your kitchen. Get in your kitchen. You can't live on ultra processed convenience foods and expect the farmers to thrive, or for the landscape to build soil, or care about pollinators, or any of the other things that you might want to care about. You have to start getting unprocessed food.
Yeah.
And our kitchens have never been better equipped to cook from scratch. You can cook from scratch today with an Instapot and a crock pot and time bake, and boom, in 20 minutes you've got a really super meal, with electronic gadgetry. So get in your kitchen. That's the number one thing. Cook from scratch. 77% of the food Americans eat is ultra processed.
Yeah.
Which by definition means that's food that you can't make in your kitchen.
Yeah.
So we need to get and that's also the way to save money.
Yes, it is. I tell people that all the time. They're like, well, healthy eating is expensive. I said, not if you cook it at home.
No.
But if you buy it all prepped, well, sure.
Yeah, my favorite story on that. I was up speaking at a conference in New York City, and I was there during one of the green markets, one of the days where the green markets are running. The big farm, arguably the largest and most expensive farmers market in the world. And so I asked my hostess. I said, "Hey, take me down to the green market." And we got there. I mean, it was shoulder to shoulder. New York City is crazy. And I said, I want you to take me to the most expensive potato at the market. And so she, I know the guy. So we went, and there was this guy. He grew heirloom potatoes, and it was like a work of art. He had this credenza with like 20 different varieties of potatoes, blue ones, red ones, yellow ones, green. I mean, it was gorgeous. I mean, his setup, and he had these little credenzas with all these potatoes. So I looked, and I found this blue Peruvian fingerling potato it was like $1.60 a pound, the most expensive potato in the most expensive market in the world. Across the street is a grocery store, and they have an entire aisle of potato chips, okay, at $4 a pound.
Yes.
All right?
We don't connect them.
No, we don't connect them. But the thing is, you can make potato chips. My wife Teresa, we make, we've got slicers and dicers and, mincers and pinchers and all sorts of things, Yeah. And fry babies, deep fat fryers, and boom, you can, and homemade potato chips are just.
For a quarter of the cost.
Yeah, they're out of this world. Yeah, exactly, for a quarter of the cost. So the thing is, we talk about something child-friendly. Kids love kitchens.
Oh, yeah, they do.
I mean,
ours are always cooking with us.
Yeah, you get the stool in there, those kids stand on that chair, and from day one, they're ready to smell it. Yeah, it'll be messy, but it'll be fun. Yeah, okay. So get in your kitchen. Number 2, do something yourself. Touch the mystery and majesty of life, even if it's nothing more than a quart jar of sprouted mung beans on the windowsill, or a little 12-inch by 12-inch earthworm bed under the sink to throw your kitchen scraps in. Let the worms make stuff to put in your flower pot. But just touch the biology, the the visceral, interaction of this transformative, seed to plant, or scraps to worm castings. I mean, just touch that. All right, do something there. Touch that. And the third thing is go find your provenance. Go find your farmer.
Yeah.
Turn off Netflix. Turn off the TV, and devote a certain amount of time to finding your food. And my favorite story on that, I was up speaking at the University of Guelph in Ontario, and it was a town hall type format, and there were 3 of us that were kind of doing the seminar, and it was basically a long a Q&A thing, but they gave each of us 5 minutes to do an opening monologue. And the lady sitting next to me was a high-powered attorney living in a 5th floor condominium in Toronto, big city. And she gets up, I'll paraphrase what she said. She said, "Our transformation happened when I got pregnant and we're going to have our first child," she and her husband. And she's going to have a child.
Yeah. Yeah, the husband has to do something.
Husband doesn't have to do a whole lot. And she said, I got pregnant, and we're asking, what are our responsibilities to this baby? We're bringing this new life in the world. And so she said, we started thinking about, what are we going to do? And so the first thing they decided was she would breastfeed. All right, well, that's cool. And so that pulls you clear out of that whole matrix of
Well, now it's not just about you
stuff.
anymore.
Yeah, right, okay. And then they decided that they would take a year and look at what they would normally spend in time and money on recreation, entertainment, going to the play, whatever. And they would take that time for 1 year and devote it to finding real food from wherever they could find it nearby. And now this has been several years ago. Probably would be impossible today, but at that time it was profound still. She said, so at the end of the year, we did not have a barcode in our pantry.
Cool.
And I just
And she was
remember
motivated.
Yeah. And I just remember sitting there and I'm saying, what's my problem? If she can do that, high-powered 6-figure attorney in Toronto, in a 6th floor condo in Toronto, what's my problem? And so I just really respect. She just was like my exhibit A. Here's what you can do. And so Dave Ramsey, the financial guru, says one of the things I've learned in life is you tend to be successful at what you put attention on.
Yes.
And I think that applies. It applies to me. It applies to anybody. If you want this, you can do it, but you have to put attention on it.
Correct.
And then you'll be successful.
Yes.
And so get in your kitchen, do something yourself to touch the mystery and majesty of life, and then focus your attention on sleuthing and vetting and finding your provenance outside the system as much as you can, outside the system. And that's my recipe.
It's very reasonable, practical. I have one last question for you. Well, what questions do you have, Mabe?
Joe, I was just going to ask you what advice would you give to the young farmers that maybe are saying it is too difficult, it is not profitable to have a completely sustainable, toxic, hormone-free, vaccine-free farm. What advice would you give to that person?
Yeah, so the first thing is to realize if somebody has done it, it can be done. In other words, believe that you can first. Saying I can't is easy.
Yes. It takes no faith to believe that.
No. I mean that's easy. What is tough is saying I can't. And so first, you have to believe that you can. Second, I would say, is find and surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do. We're back to Dave Ramsey's proximity principle. Proximity principle is get as close as you can to somebody who is doing what you want to do, so that you're being fed the attitude, the goals, the protocols of people who are successfully doing what you're doing. Now that closeness doesn't mean necessarily, physically close, but read what they're doing, befriend them, learn from them, let them mentor you, so that you're being fed somebody who's successful at doing what you want to do. And then the third thing I would say is you have to innovate and experiment, and don't be concerned about failing or making mistakes. Okay. Thomas Edison and his light bulb is my favorite thing of that, and he did 150 experiments, and they all failed. And when they were at experiment 150, they all came in because they thought they certainly had at that time. They didn't, and all of his team was scared to tell him. And finally, when one of them said, "Yeah, it didn't work," Edison said, "Oh, good, we know something else that doesn't work. That brings us closer to what will."
All perspective.
It is. It's totally perspective. My personal story on that was nothing is more depressing for a farmer than a drought. A drought. Everything withers. There's nothing you can do about it. It just is there. And I would, in a drought, I would just get in a funk. I mean, just, oh man, what? You look up every day, rain, no rain. Until finally it struck me, this is I gotta invert this. And so now I come in a drought and I say, hey man, we're one day closer to rain. Because it always rains. That's how a drought ends.
You just don't know when.
You just don't know when. And so that completely inverts your attitude to come and say, okay, we're one day closer to rain, instead of another day without rain, one day closer to rain. And so cultivate that kind of abundance mentality in your own place, and experiment, and realize that those mistakes are one step closer to mastery, because mastery requires repetition, reps. Football, reps. In farming, it's reps, and you don't develop mastery until you've been through the crucible of mistakes and failures.
Yeah.
And then the final thing I would say is just don't quit. I've watched so many people in my life come and go and come and go and come and go. And it's the old cliches, it's darkest right before the dawn, and what happens is if you give up right before your breakthrough, that's what typically happens. You're right ready to have the answer and breakthrough, and I'm quitting. I'm throwing in the towel. And I always tell people, I say, look, I'm not smarter. I don't think I work harder. We just were too stubborn to quit.
Yeah.
We're just too stubborn to quit. And here we are, 50 years later, and it finally pays off.
Einstein said, "I'm not smarter than anyone else. I just stick with a problem longer."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Exactly what you're saying.
Exactly the point.
And some people are like, "Oh, East Tennesseans are stubborn. They won't change." I'm like, no. You have to properly apply that stubbornness.
Right.
Then they can do anything.
Right. Exactly.
It's all perspective.
Yeah, it sure is.
So one last question I had, unless you have another one.
I do have one.
Go for it.
I find that I have met a lot of really driven people, but one of the group of people that I know that is most driven in this make American healthy again movement is parents, moms. And so there are a lot of people that are trying to start a new movement towards health. And you talk about proximity in your talk today. Have your food be close to you, the source of where you're getting it from. And I see that you have a book called Family Friendly Farming. So what kind of resources that you have written about will you get a family to that is wanting to take the next step in creating sustainability within their home?
Well, I mean, I've written a bunch of books, but in family friendly farming, I talk about, for example, how to work with your kids so they will want to work with you. In fact, that's worth the book, 10 chapters, and I actually do a talk on that at a lot of homeschooling conferences, because a lot of parents struggle with how do I get my kid to put their clothes away, or to help to help gather eggs or pull the weeds in the green beans, and so these are I call it 10 commandments for working with your kids so they'll want to work with you, and and that's a huge problem in farming because so many parents ostracize their kids because they won't give up any authority. And so what happens is kids don't feel they don't feel like they have value to add. And so if you want a harmonious family, whatever, business environment, and a farm is a business, you have to create a habitat in which the children feel like they can make valuable contributions, both with their labor and with their ideas. And I can tell you from day one, we asked our kids for their idea. What do you think about this idea? We had people, you talk to your kids like you actually value their opinions. Well, I do, because they haven't done it this way all their lives. They're coming into it with fresh eyes. And so, my greatest blessing right now is that, our son runs the farm. Daniel loves it. He grew up with it. And so I'm very thankful that at this stage of my life, I'm the most expendable person on the farm. And I'll say one other thing. Unfortunately, most farmers my age are lonelier than they've ever been in their life.
Their suicide rates 3 times higher.
The kids are gone, and now my knees are hurting, and it's hard to get up and down off that tractor, and how long do I keep going? And the thing is with a farmer, your farmer's your identity. Yeah. I mean, it's your equity. A lot of times it's been in your family, it's your legacy, it's everything, and suddenly the kids are gone, I'm alone. And so for me to be at this stage in my life surrounded by these 20 and 30-year-old young people that are just enthusiastic they just can't wait to do what I've spent my life doing is just, it brings you to tears. It's so powerful and profound, and I'm just a very grateful old geezer.
Young geezer. Young geezer. Because you're only old when you decide to be old.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can think about this question for a second. Give us one or two farmers' wisdom for anyone watching this. Something I've learned on the farm that will help you in life.
So the most valuable thing probably in my life was growing up in a family that embraced different. We weren't different because we were masochists or sadists or anything like that, but we were convictionally different and embraced it, relished being different. And as farmers, one of the most important thing we could do is do experiments and observe and grow with our farm, grow with what we're learning, with what we're observing, with what we're seeing. And so many farmers are just stuck on the advice of the salesman, the advice of what they hear at a conference, and are reluctant to do something that the neighbor farmer might laugh at them about. But my mentor, Alan Nation, used to tell me, he said, if you have an idea and you go to your farm neighbor and present your idea to him, and the farm neighbor says, that's a good idea, you should do that, don't do it. That won't be it. But if you go and you tell your neighbor, my idea, and the neighbor says, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, that's probably your answer. That's probably the best thing to do. And so this peer dependency, because there are so few farmers. Farmers have almost become a subculture. There are so few of us, it becomes almost a subculture fraternity kind of thing. And so farmers, they're already lonely. The average farmer is 60 years old. And so They're already lonely. So the neighbors thought we were nuts. You know, and so in my life, I've been called by neighbors. I've been called a bioterrorist. I've been called a typhoid Mary, a starvation advocate, because we all know compost can't grow food like chemicals can. And you know, and that's one reason why I took this Christian libertarian environmentalist capitalist lunatic farmer handle, because I looked at that and said, well, I can either be frustrated and depressed about, you know, the resentment or the whatever, the negative feedback from the greater farming community, or I can embrace it and have fun with it and turn it into something positive. And so now I can do that. I can do it with a smile, and it's fairly disarming, and it has become, you know, a great brand, because if you Google lunatic farmer, there's only one in the world, and it's me. And so
You've had a lot more fun than some other farmers.
and I've had a lot more fun. So embrace different. Embrace different. It's the secret sauce of progress.
Yeah, and most of us fear different.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then we just get paralyzed. We don't do anything.
Yeah.
Well, Joel, I appreciate your farmer's wisdom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.